I'd like to welcome you to our final video in this series of figuring out the secrets to a long and healthy and happy marriage, not only in the short term, but also in the long term. And as we go through this final video in this series, I really want to encourage you to grow and continue to grow in your marriage. And if you've made it this far, you've already taken some significant steps forward. As a review, as we always like to do, let's look back on some of the things that we've talked about up to this point. We talked about this idea of praying together as a couple. Every single day, you and your spouse holding hands, praying together, praying for others, praying for your family, praying for your own personal growth, spiritual growth, professional growth, etc. Praying for your relationship. Then we said it's really important for you to commit to a local, healthy church family. One where you can worship together and serve together and really come together and receive communion and do all the things that will help you thrive spiritually. And then in week 3, we talked about this idea of starting a marriage course, and we'll talk about that more at the end of this video, where you can begin a marriage training program that helps you, not 4 hours a week, but 30 minutes a week, and get coaching. Get someone to look and encourage and challenge and hold you accountable to growing your marriage intentionally. In week number 4, we looked at the importance of connecting to a marriage group, a group where you can grow and thrive with like-minded people, a group where you can receive feedback and make significant observations in how others are relating one to another in their marriage relationship. And then we moved forward and we talked about this idea of aligning your life and your marriage to God's Word, the source of all wisdom, so important in your life. And as we continued in week 6, we talked about this idea of making decisions together. It's really foundational for the long-term health and happiness of your relationship. And this week, without further ado, aggressively eliminate all debt. And I love this word, aggressively, because we're looking at this word with all seriousness. If there is one thing that creates significant challenges in a marriage, in your marriage, just like mine, it's the issue of debt. Debt. Debt is one of the leading factors for separation, divorce, marital conflicts, etc. There is something about debt that really wrecks marriages. So I'd like for you to consider a couple things that I have here written down. Debt, what does it evoke in your marriage? It evokes stress, and it evokes, sorry about that, it evokes stress, and it also evokes uncertainty. Here we go. Thank you. So as you consider your marriage, consider this. The more debt you have in your marriage, the more stress you will have without a shadow of a doubt, and the more uncertainty you will have in your marriage relationship. So let's think for a minute. We've talked about several different topics, right? And this idea of making decisions together and coming together as a couple is a fantastic idea. But what has the potential to disrupt making decisions together? It's right here. Stress and uncertainty, because we have so much debt. When you have so much debt, you can't think sometimes about very practical things to lead you out of that situation, to lead your marriage forward, because the debt can consume you. So what happens when couples have significant amounts of debt? Here's what we find. They argue more, they complain more, there's things that they can't do because of the debt. They can't take certain vacations, they can't do certain things because the debt is just overwhelming. Another thing I wrote down here is they begin blaming each other. I mean, it's almost like debt becomes this tool in their relationship where they start flinging it one to the other, depending on who is the one responsible for the debt. And in all actuality, when you get married, whatever debt you had as a single person, whatever debt your spouse had as a single person, guess what? It's now both of yours to manage aggressively. It's not that it's his debt or her debt, it's both of your debts. This is something, again, that causes a lot of strife because you can't get into the blame game. You have to come together to eliminate all debt. Debt is not something that you can ignore. Debt is not something that you should ignore in your marriage. So let me give you my story because I think that might help encourage you in some way. Years ago, when I was working a corporate job, I decided to purchase an investment property. So I violated rule number 6 or principle number 6 that we talked about last time, making decisions together. Honestly, it wasn't a decision that we made together. I wanted to do this. It was a great deal. I wanted to capitalize on this investment opportunity, and I knew my wife wouldn't understand. So I just decided I'm going to do this. I could finance it on my own. That was not smart. That was actually very foolish. So what did I do? I carried out my plan. I signed the papers. But what I didn't know, what I didn't anticipate, was that shortly after 2005, if you remember, we had the housing bubble and the market crashed. Well, when the market crashed and people couldn't afford many things, then my renters, some of them stopped paying. They couldn't afford it. I had to try to finance things and get creative on how I can help them, but at the same time find other renters that can come in. It was an amazing amount of stress. But here's what I learned in the process, and I hope you pay close attention to this. Although it was stressful to me, and I managed it, and I said, okay, I've got this problem, I've got to manage it. It was 10 times more stressful to my spouse. Listen, it was 10 times more stressful to my spouse. So even though I was okay in a sense, managing this problem, we'll get through it, we'll plow through it, I underestimated how much it impacted my wife. She was more stressed than ever, and I really couldn't understand it. I was not being very wise during that time, but I learned a big lesson. Stress affects couples differently. You might be okay with managing large amounts of debt or other kinds of stress, but your spouse may not. It will impact you differently than it will impact them. And you need to be aware of that, because what happens is, remember, if you don't aggressively eliminate stress or eliminate debt for that matter, what does it create? It creates stress. It creates uncertainty. And during that time, there were many things that my wife was uncertain about. There were many things that she was stressed about. And if I could be totally honest, it was all my fault. It was a bad move on my part. It was something that I learned from painfully, but if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have purchased a property. I would have done things differently. And that's what I'm hoping for you. I hope you will consider doing things differently as it relates to your debt. You may find the deal of a lifetime to buy a business, to buy a home. Get your spouse involved. What is that going to do to your debt to income ratio? What is that going to do, for your vacations and your spendable and your margins and your savings and your plan for retirement? Don't underestimate the impact and the stress and the uncertainty that debt will have on your relationship. So here's the question. Why should you aggressively eliminate all debt? Because debt will directly impact your marriage. Debt will remove that happiness factor, that contentment factor, because the stress and the uncertainty is so great. So let me give you a couple of tips here I think will be helpful as I raise my notes up. Here they go. Ready? Here's some practical tips for you and your spouse. Start paying off your high interest credit cards first. Whatever credit card you have that is 22%, whatever the percentage is today, pay those off first. But remember, pay those off what? Aggressively. Don't be casual about debt. I always think back at, Disney's Animal Kingdom, right? You go and you watch the animals, and they're either in, very well protected areas. There's no way they're going to get to us. But can you imagine if one of the lions one day, who every time you see the lion, he is sitting there and relaxing. But imagine one day that lion would get out and you found yourself on the trail. Would you casually walk away from that lion? No. You would do what? You would run. You would run as fast as you possibly could to get away from that lion. Aggressively get out of debt. Aggressively eliminate all debt. Start with your high interest credit cards first. Secondly, pay off your car loans, pay off any lines of credit that you may have in your business or in your home, school loans, pay those off. Don't just look and say, well, I'll just pay the minimum. Make an aggressive plan. Start with the high interest ones and work your way down to the lower interest debt. Number 3 is evaluate and cancel any recurring subscriptions that you don't need. There are some things that you might be paying $4.99 a month for, $6.99 a month for, but in all actuality, you don't need that. You can take that money and put it towards something else, like reducing your debt. That's important. Number 4, if you own a home, send an extra principal payment every month. When we started with this home that we have now, we said, okay, let's send an extra X amount of dollars every single month, extra principal. So instead of a 30-year mortgage, we can pay this off in 15 years without having to do some special financing arrangement. That was really helpful, and thankfully, we're almost there with paying off our home. Number 5, evaluate your financial plans and debt every 2 weeks. It's important for you and your spouse to sit down and evaluate your debt. Where are you today? Where are you going to be at the end of this month? If no new income comes in and you have your salaries, where are we? Where do we want to be? How are we going to get there? The more you talk about these things with your spouse, the greater success you can have long term. So I hope this has been an encouragement to you. I hope this series has stimulated something in you and in your spouse to help move your relationship forward. This is essential for you to have a happy marriage, not only today, but this is essential for you to have a happy marriage for many years into the future. As we've said before in many of these videos, we invite you to take our free training. It's a 30-minute training. Down here in the description, you have a free link. You can click on the link, go to the training, sign up, and you can watch the replay or schedule a time that's convenient for you and for your spouse. We want to encourage you in your marriage. So don't delay. Go ahead, register for this free marriage training webinar and get started today. Thank you for allowing us to serve you.